Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSPEAKS, we're talking about the market for observability technology. We'll look at how the observability market is changing and what's driving that change. To discuss that, I'm joined by Peter Pezaris, Chief Strategy and Design Officer at New Relic. Peter, happy Friday to you, and good to have you with us.
Happy Friday. Thanks for having me here.
So we've got this interesting report. You've got some great stats and things. Before we get to that, I'd like to get about 15, 30 seconds or so, the elevator pitch, so to speak, about what does New Relic do? I know a lot of people know over New Relic, of course, but for those who don't know New Relic, what does the company do?
So we're a provider of observability capabilities. And what that means is that we aim to help every engineer make decisions based on data, not opinions, at every stage of the software development lifecycle. So what we do is we provide the tools and the software and the services to allow you to instrument your systems in order to provide more insight as to how they're performing and what your customers are experiencing as they use your software. And through those insights, you can increase your uptime. You can ensure a great customer experience. And if you do have an outage, we help you troubleshoot it and get your service back up and running quickly.
Okay, important stuff to be sure. If you're going to run a lot of gear, you need observability. Yourself, Peter, how long have you worked for New Relic?
So I've been at New Relic a little over 2 years. I came to New Relic by way of an acquisition. I was the CEO of a company called CodeStream that was acquired by New Relic a little over 2 years ago. And I currently serve as our Chief Strategy and Design Officer. I sort of have two somewhat distinct jobs. Part of my job is to run our corporate and business development and product partnerships. And the other side of my job is to run the design department and be responsible for the overall customer experience of eWEEK.com.
Got it. Okay, so this seems like enough to keep you busy for sure.
That's right.
So the observability market is really interesting. I've heard so much more about it in the last, a few years. It seems like it's gotten to be a far bigger market than it used to be. What sort of trends do you see in the deployment of observability in the enterprise? And are companies struggling with it in any way?
Yeah, so we see a number of trends, and I should say that as I answer these questions, it's not that I'm the foremost expert in observability, but rather that we're relying heavily on a report that we commissioned this year. This is the third year in a row that we've done this. It's called our Observability Forecast.
Right.
And in that report, we surveyed 1,700 practitioners and executives on their usage of observability tools. And there are a number of very interesting trends. So it's an imperative forward-thinking activity for enterprise leaders. And one of the really interesting bits of feedback is how important it is to businesses. And that by 2026, 82% of our respondents expected to deploy all 17 of the defined observability capabilities. So there's lots of different parts to observability, and a full 82% of the respondents expected to deploy all of them, which is a remarkable number because they see the value in observability. Some of the additional trends include that an increased focus on security is driving their observability needs, and the adoption of new technologies such as generative AI.
That's interesting. I sorry to interrupt you. The idea of generative AI in the world of observability, how would Gen AI play a role in observability?
Well, I would sort of flip the question around and ask, how can observability help those companies that are adopting Gen AI? So when I think about the most disruptive technologies that I've witnessed personally in my career, the first has got to be the internet itself, or the World Wide Web. And that, if you think about what it forced companies to do, it forced companies to adopt a new way of interacting with their customers. And I think we can all agree that almost every business in the world now has a web presence. And they use that, whether it's to transact, whether it's to offer services, whether it's to provide customer support. There are a number of different ways. And that gave rise to the need to observe those applications that are running on the web. And that's how the observability industry itself was born. The second big wave in technology changes is the advent of mobile apps. and the iPhone and competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And so too did that create opportunity for the observability providers, because you need to make sure that your mobile apps are performing well as well. Plus, there's often a back end associated with those mobile apps that you need to keep up and running. Gen AI, I believe, will produce yet another platform of the same scale as the web and mobile. It's a new mechanism, a new way of interacting with your customers. And it's different enough. It really is a completely different interaction pattern that companies will need to figure out how to, well, first of all, to define what the Gen AI stack looks like, because it'll be a completely different technology stack. And then how to instrument it and how to ensure that your customers are getting a good experience. And, the metrics that we're using to track are a little bit different. When you're talking about a web-based application, you talk about the time to first contentful paint, which is a mouthful, but it's basically when do customers get to see a page load after you click on a link? How quickly does that happen? Things like, what's the error rate? How often do you serve an error instead of the page you're expecting? What's the latency? What's the load time? So all these are the metrics that we're used to for web-based apps. Well, in Gen AI, it's a completely different set of metrics. It's how long until we see the first words of the response appear? How often do we see hallucinations? How often do our customers tell us that they got a good response versus a bad response? So it's a brand new set of metrics, it's a wide open, blank canvas of technology, and New Relic's at the forefront of helping customers instrument their apps so that they can understand their own usage of Gen AI.
I mean, it does feel like it would be, a new Wild West world of observability. You're saying currently it's not realistic to expect that an observability platform would be set up to really, handle Gen AI, correct or not correct?
Well, we're very rapidly deploying those capabilities, and our strategy is to treat it as your other applications and to integrate it into our platform. So if you're an existing customer of ours and you deploy some new Gen AI capability as part of your application, those metrics will just light up in your existing New Relic experience. So we want to make it super easy for customers to adopt this technology using their existing workflows and usage patterns of our product. So as easy as we can make it for customers, we think that it'll make it even easier for them to adopt new technologies.
It feels like there's an exponentially more difficult challenge with monitoring and with Gen AI, and that, say it's a hallucination, how is this system really set up to understand it's an hallucination? I asked you, when did Christopher Columbus land in what is now known as North America? And it starts talking about it's 100 years off. How would the system know? Oh wait, no, the year was 1492, and the system said it's 1515. Gosh, we better ring a bell. That's a big challenge, I would think.
It is. Although I am reminded of the feedback we got with early web-based products like Wikipedia. When Wikipedia first became popular, the feedback among skeptics was that it'll never be accurate enough. And there were so many mistakes, and people celebrated the mistakes and had viral moments about the mistakes of Wikipedia. And then somebody commissioned a report to really look into the accuracy and did a scientific study and found that at the time, it was about as accurate as the Encyclopedia Britannica. So as it turns out, encyclopedias have mistakes as well.
Right.
And so I think that Gen AI, what you can say about its hallucination rate is that it's the worst it will ever be. And yes, it's a challenge today, but it's getting better and better and better. And I think technologists understand that trend, and it's almost limitless potential.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, obviously, Gen AI is still in its infancy, and so it will only get better. But then the question is, it's still a real challenge for the observability platform to step in and go, that is an hallucination, or that is not, or maybe it's even a shade of meaning. That seems like it's going to be really a challenge for observability platforms.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of different approaches that companies are taking, including New Relic, because we have our own Gen AI capability within our product as well. So not only can we help other companies observe their use of Gen AI, we have Gen AI capabilities that we announced. We call it Grok, and it's in limited preview today and allows customers to interact with all of New Relic using their preferred natural language. And so today, one of the most important aspects to report and improve on hallucinations is through human feedback. So as customers see a response like you did, that the Christopher Columbus date was wrong, there's a thumbs up, the thumbs down button, and you can report an inaccuracy, and that will be fed back into the systems and help improve it. Well, one of the things that we do with our Grok product is one of its great use cases is that we allow you to translate from English into NERQL, which is our query language. And in that way, you can ask a question in English, but then you see the intermediate step of what the NERQL query that's being generated. So when it runs against your data, you know exactly what you're getting back. And that provides sort of a checks and balances for to take care of some of the hallucinations. So we're still using the sort of definitive tool of querying your data and showing the results, but you can start out with English and make it a little bit easier.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's. I want to make sure we dig into the report. I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff in there. Let's look at a few key data points from the 2023 observability report. What really stood out to you?
Yeah, there were a few that were really sort of surprising numbers that jumped off the page. I think the first one is that downtime from our customers is costing them on average $500,000 per hour. That's quite a remarkable number. And in the aggregate, companies were losing out on over almost $8 million, $7.75 million of revenue annually. And among those respondents that adopted full stack observability, which means you're observing every major part of your application stack, including security, infrastructure, services, client, browser and mobile. Among them, they had significantly less, almost $3 million less in outages every year. And not only that, but so we know that observability can help with managing downtime and revenue loss. The more maturity that an enterprise had with their observability practice, the more they saved and lost revenue. And this number really jumped up at me is for every dollar companies are spending on observability, they get a 2x ROI on that dollar spent. So for every dollar they spend on an observability solution, they're getting $2 back in savings or productivity.
Interesting. Can I interrupt you, Peter, in that? I think that it's a really interesting number about such a large amount of money for like 1 hour of downtime. Yeah. Which says to me those are some pretty large companies in the first place. Obviously, you're not going to be losing $500,000, an hour or whatever it would be if you're the local pizza parlor. It must be like a large multinational or large enterprise. Does that suggest there are indeed still large enterprises that have not deployed observability? I mean, what do you think is the market penetration of observability in general?
Yeah, so one of the things it was described as a highly by somebody outside of this report. It's described to me as one of the research firm that we worked with as a highly vended market, which means that observability is very broadly adopted among larger enterprise. However, what the way in which enterprise have adopted observability is suboptimal in two ways. So there's room for improvement in two ways. One is that it's fragmented across tools. And that came out very clear in the report that not only do customers prefer a single tool by almost 2 to 1, but they've got too many tools, with almost 2/3 of respondents saying that they have 4 or more observability tools. So that's one way in which your observability maturity could be improved in the enterprise, is by tool consolidation. And the second way is we see feedback from customers. Their usage of observability varies from business unit to business unit. So depending on how the company is structured, the set of services that you're responsible for as part of your business unit may be dependent on another business unit. And if they're using a different set of observability tools, then that creates data silos. And so you can't get the benefits of a mature observability practice because the data has these boundaries, and so you can't follow your customer journey throughout the entire software stack.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, all right. I want to continue with the report. What else really stood out for you?
Let's see. One of the key findings is that, as I said, we've done this report now 3 years in a row, and outages appear to be happening less frequently year over year. So high impact outages are affecting 36% of the respondents compared to 52% for medium impact, and 63% are experiencing low impact business outages. And that's down from the last year. One of the findings, just which dovetails nicely into what we've already been talking about, is that having that full stack observability is correlating to better outcomes for customers, and that's a repeat finding that we see in every report that we've conducted. And even though most companies haven't achieved full stack observability yet, those who have done so have improved all of their service level metrics. So that means lower downtime, better availability for their services, and which leads, of course, to overall better customers' satisfaction. We found that observability deployment is on the rise. That customers last year told us that they plan to increase their observability practice, and the numbers bore that out. That in this year's survey, that we saw that full stack observability actually increased 58% year over year. So customers are seeing the value in having a complete view of their entire estate to be able to troubleshoot problems and resolve them more quickly.
Does the report give the total number? I mean, it increased 58%, so it could say what the total absolute number is of companies that have deployed full stack observability?
I think I'll be able to dig in and get back to that number. I don't have the entire report memorized. It's some hundreds of pages. So
I'm actually kind of relieved you have not memorized the entire report. I'd be a little worried about you if you had, but it's impressive. Even what you know is great. Well, let's make sure we dig into New Relic. You have talked about New Relic and its offering, but how is New Relic really impacting the observability market? What is the New Relic take on the market?
I think we differentiate ourselves in two important ways. The first is that we provide an all-in-one platform with platform pricing. And what that means is, and this report really highlights the need for a single tool, or the benefits for a single tool, to have full stack observability and a mature observability practice where all of your data is in one place, so you don't have data silos and screen swivel, where you're much less efficient. So our all-in-one platform means that once you sign up for New Relic, you can instrument every part of your stack and have it in one consistent interface. We've got infra capabilities, APM, logs, anything, browser, mobile, anything that you'd like to do, you can do all in one place. And importantly, we don't sell that SKU by SKU. Once you sign up for New Relic, we've got a very simple business model, which is that you pay for the data that you send us with very inexpensive per gigabyte pricing, and then you pay to have access of your engineers to use the platform. But once they get access to the platform, they get access to all of the capabilities. So it's much simpler for enterprises to deploy New Relic. The second way we differentiate from the competition is that we aim to bring insights to every stage of the software development lifecycle. And this is sort of shifting observability left, because we find that it's much, much more expensive for customers to find and fix problems in production than if you can do it earlier in the development lifecycle. And our thesis is that when given better data, developers will write better code. And so we're aiming to do that by bringing important production telemetry into the hands of the application developers as they write and review and plan their software.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, is it realistic to think that even a large enterprise could have 2 to 3 observability deployments? I mean, if you would pitch a company and we have observability, it's brand X. Mm-hmm. I mean, would you say no, then we can't interoperate with them? I mean, must it be one provider or none, or is it the practice of the industry to interoperate with other observability vendors?
Well, there isn't a lot of interoperability between observability vendors. So if, for example, you're sending your logs to observability vendor, A,
Mhm.
and you've got APM with observability vendor B, for the most part, those two don't interact in any way. And
Mhm.
so the net result is that as you're troubleshooting a problem and you realize that your login service, for example, it has high latency and you're seeing increased errors, well, then you have to switch from your APM service vendor into your logging service vendor. And then you're sort of starting from scratch because you've got to find a needle in the haystack to try to find the logs for that particular service.
Mhm.
So it really loses context, and you have to regain that context every time you switch from one type of data to another. So the benefits of having an all-in-one tool like New Relic is that we have, for this particular example, something that we call logs and context. So as you're looking at the diagnostics for that particular login service, you can see the log lines for that login service, and it's
Mhm.
right there on the same page, and you can very quickly diagnose the problems, not only for that login service, but if you're looking at an individual transaction trace, you can look at the individual spans, and if any of them have errors associated with them, you can just open them up right on the same page. So it makes troubleshooting a lot more accurate and helps more customers, more of your engineers find problems more quickly and get to the root cause. Not only that, but by having a broad view of your estate, sometimes just identifying the problems become much easier if you have an all-in-one solution, because your engineers don't have to be trained across n different vendors' UIs. So if you do need to pull in a vendor, an engineer to help you troubleshoot something, they'll be familiar with the same interface rather than having to learn a brand new tool.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's look to the future. I mean, I think obviously observability is clearly growing. What do you see about the future of observability in the enterprise? A couple of key milestones in the years ahead. What do you say?
Well, I'm very bullish on Gen AI, and our customers are um, asking the types of questions that make it clear that it's become important for them. I can't remember the last customer conversation that I had that didn't talk about that in some way.
Mhm.
A lot of companies are scrambling to figure out what it means for them and how they can build it well, how they can price it and pay for it,
Mhm.
and how they can provide a good customer experience. And so that's an easy conversation for us, given that we have the tools to help them do exactly those things. But I see that as an increasing trend in the industry. There was a recent report by Goldman Sachs that suggested that worldwide GDP could rise by as much as 7%
Mhm.
because of Gen AI. That's a
Mhm.
bonkers big number.
Really, if you think about world GDP, that is a massive number.
Yeah. And so I think if their prediction holds true, then we're going to see an incredible amount of disruption across a number of different industries. And that creates opportunities for observability vendors.
Hmm. Do you get back to the question of adoption? Do you have a sense of what the total market is? Maybe I ask you this. I find that fascinating. What percentage of companies have not suboptimal, but actually true observability adoption? Is it 50%, 40%? What's your best guess in that regard?
So, according to one of the data points in our survey, 67% of respondents do not have what we define as full stack observability. So that's a pretty big number, that only a third of them have what we define as full stack observability, and that includes 5 elements, which is security monitoring, services monitoring or APM, environment monitoring or infra, customer experience monitor, and log management.
Hmm. That's a lot of companies that are in essence flying blind. It's a big possible problem.
Yeah, they at least have one blind spot, because I think most enterprises and companies of any significant size understand the value of observability, but they might think, oh, if I've got APM, then that shows me enough. And I think what we're finding, and what the respondents of the survey are finding, is that the more that you instrument, not only do you find problems faster and reduce downtime and save money, but the money that you spent on that additional observability pays off, and it pays off 2 to 1. So it's really a practice that's becoming more and more standard.
Great. Peter, I think you said it. It's a lot of good stuff. Obviously, the observability market is growing. I learned a ton. I hope you come back and talk with us again sometime.
Fantastic. I'd love to. Thanks so much for including me in this session.